All right, Kevin, welcome back. Ready to transform that EverQuest Warrior of yours into a true raid night legend? Because we are diving deep into 12 Strings 125 Warrior Guide tonight, and let me tell you, this thing is the real deal. You weren't kidding when you said you wanted to dominate the battlefield.
12 Strings definitely knows their stuff. It's clear they've poured a lot of time and experience into this guy.
And that's exactly why we're here. This deep dive is all about taking that wealth of knowledge and turning it into like actionable insights for you. We're talking warrior wisdom without the weeks of research. So Kevin, picture this. It's raid night, the team is assembled, and all eyes are on you. You're the mighty warrior, shield gleaming, ready to charge into the thick of it. No pressure, right?
Well, there's always a little pressure when you're the one, standing between your friends and a fire-breathing dragon.
Right, but that's the glory of being a warrior. You're the shield, the front line, the last line of defense. And what I love about 12 Strings' approach is like the emphasis on practical, in-the-moment awareness. This isn't about becoming a spreadsheet warrior, crunching numbers and min-maxing every stat.
Absolutely. 12 Strings gets that for a lot of players, especially those who, like Kevin, are raiding, once a week with friends. It's more about being present and adaptable.
Exactly. So Kevin, forget memorizing a million different things. 12 Strings is going to teach us how to read the battlefield, anticipate enemy attacks, and react accordingly.
And that starts with mastering the fundamentals, especially when it comes to your defensive abilities. Think of it this way. The more confident you are in your ability to take a hit, the more you can focus on what's happening around you and make those split-second decisions that keep everyone alive.
It's like that saying, right? The best defense is a good offense. Okay, maybe not exactly, but you get the idea.
What I appreciate is how 12 Strings breaks down complex concepts into digestible chunks. They really excel at explaining not just what to do, but why it matters.
And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable for you, Kevin. We're cutting through the noise and giving you the tools to become a truly effective tank. So, with that in mind, let's equip you with that bedrock of warrior knowledge, starting with the heart of it all. Defense.
All right, Kevin, buckle up, because 12 Strings does not hold back when it comes to defensive abilities. We're talking names like Climactic Stand, Flash of Anger. It's like they reached into a superhero movie and pulled out the coolest moves.
And using them correctly can make you feel like a superhero too, especially when you're saving your entire group from a wipe.
Right, but with great power comes, well, the need to know which buttons to press at the right time. So let's break down these epic defensive disciplines and how they fit into your warrior arsenal.
12 Strings does a great job of highlighting the core three you'll want to master, starting with Fortitude. The oh crap button, as I like to call it.
Exactly. Once you've maxed out the related skills, Fortitude grants you a beautiful 24 seconds of complete immunity to frontal melee attacks. That's right, Kevin. For almost half a minute, those claws, teeth, and poorly aimed swords might as well be made of rubber chickens.
Sounds amazing, but I'm guessing there's a catch.
There is. It comes with a 20-minute cooldown.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty hefty cooldown. Definitely not something you want to waste on a couple of stray goblins.
Precisely. This is your emergency button, your get-out-of-jail-free card. Save it for those moments when the raid boss decides to unleash their ultimate attack, or when you find yourself accidentally standing in a pool of lava.
Noted. No using Fortitude to avoid doing the dishes, no matter how tempting.
Now, for those times when you need sustained damage mitigation, Climactic Stand is your best friend.
So if Fortitude is the oh crap button, Climactic Stand is more like the okay, things are about to get real button.
Exactly. Think boss fights, large pulls, those chaotic situations where you know you're going to be taking a beating for an extended period. Climactic Stand significantly reduces incoming damage for a solid 3 minutes.
3 minutes of taking significantly less damage? That's got to be a lifesaver for those longer encounters.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And then, to round out our core defensive trio, we have Vigorous Defense.
This one sounds a little less dramatic, but no less important.
It's the epitome of simple yet effective. Vigorous Defense is a passive ability that provides a constant armor class, or AC, boost.
So for those of us who might be new to the whole tanking scene, what exactly does a higher AC mean in practical terms?
It means you're essentially a tougher nut to crack. The higher your AC, the less likely enemies are to land successful hits on you. And for a warrior who's supposed to be soaking up damage like a sponge, that's pretty crucial.
Right. It's the difference between like confidently holding the front line and constantly getting chipped away at by every goblin sneeze.
Exactly. Now, Kevin, While the guide goes into other defensive disciplines, 12 strings really emphasizes these three as the core for most situations.
Got it. Master these three, and you're well on your way to becoming an impenetrable wall of warrior awesomeness. But there's more to being a great tank than just being able to take a hit, right? You've got to make sure those enemies are focusing on you, not our poor, unsuspecting healer.
Absolutely. Great defense is nothing without solid aggro management, and that's what we'll dive into next.
Aggro management, it's the fine line between being a hero and being, well, that guy in the group, you know. The one who steals all the kills and makes the DPS question their life choices.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you're in control of the battlefield, not just, randomly yanking enemies around.
Right, because a chaotic tank is like a recipe for disaster. So Kevin, no pressure, but how do we make sure those mobs are laser focused on you and not, say, our poor healer who's just trying to keep everyone alive?
Well, 12 strings covers a range of aggro grabbing techniques, but one that I think will resonate with you, Kevin, is Warlord's Fury. It's incredibly straightforward to use and provides a nice, consistent aggro boost. Think of it as your always-on aggro aura.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Simple, effective, no need to overthink it. Set it and forget it.
Pretty much. Then you've got Blast of Anger for those moments when an enemy gets a little too distracted. Maybe they're eyeing up the mage, or perhaps they wandered a bit too close to that cliff edge, and you need to pull them back into the fight.
It's like that metaphorical hook that yanks them back in line, or maybe a very literal hook, knowing EverQuest.
Now here's one I think you'll particularly enjoy, Kevin, fan of Aggressor. This ability summons a pet that actually helps you build and hold aggro. It's like having a little aggro apprentice fighting alongside you.
Okay, that's cool. It's like having your own personal bodyguard, except, instead of protecting you, it's making sure all the bad guys are looking at you.
Precisely. And for someone still getting the hang of tanking, having that extra bit of aggro support can be invaluable.
It's like having a safety net, so you don't have to worry about accidentally losing aggro and having your entire group turn into a monster buffet. But I'm noticing something interesting here. 12 strings emphasizes proactive taunting. Now, I always thought taunting was something you did reactively, like, hey buddy, eyes on me, not the poor cleric you're currently using as a chew toy.
That's a common misconception. The way 12 strings explains it, and I have to agree with them here, is that modern taunting, especially with certain skills maxed out, is more than just a reaction. It's a tool for building and maintaining a significant amount of what we call hate.
Hey, so like making the monsters really hate you, like I'm gonna write angry letters on your Facebook wall. Hate!
Essentially, yes. It's about making yourself the most appealing target in the room. The more they hate you, the less likely they are to even glance at anyone else.
Got it. So don't be afraid to use that taunt liberally. Let those monsters know who's boss. But that brings us to a whole other level of aggro wrangling, the dreaded AoE or area of effect. This is where things can go sideways fast, right?
AoE aggro can be a double-edged sword. It's incredibly powerful when used correctly, but misuse it, and you're looking at a recipe for a total party wipe.
Okay, so let's make sure Kevin has a firm grasp on this whole AoE aggro thing. What does 12 strings recommend to keep us on the right side of a heroic victory?
One ability that stands out, especially for a warrior in your position, Kevin, is Penumbral Expanse. Now this AoE aggro ability is interesting because its effectiveness scales with the amount of healing you receive.
And let's be real, as the tank, you're probably getting a whole lot of love from your healer, those poor overworked souls.
Exactly. So Penumbral Expanse becomes this fantastically potent tool for holding the attention of multiple enemies because, let's face it, as a warrior, you're already going to be the center of attention. This just ensures they stay focused on you.
Love it. So what else do we have in our AoE arsenal?
For those smaller groups of ads, Roar of Challenge is your go-to. It's a quick and efficient way to make those pesky little critters regret ever setting foot near your group.
Quick and efficient, music to any warrior's ears.
And then we have the big one, the break in case of emergency button, Area Taunt.
Big one and emergency button in the same sentence. That doesn't sound ominous at all.
It's as dramatic as it sounds. Area Taunt forces every single enemy within a certain radius to target you. Think of it as a giant glowing kick me sign, except, instead of kicking, they'll be using swords, spells, and probably a few teeth if they can manage it.
Okay, so this is definitely a use sparingly ability.
Exactly. It's incredibly powerful, but you only get one shot with it every 5 minutes. Overuse it, and you'll find yourself overwhelmed faster than you can say, incoming heals, please.
Noted. Area taunt for those, oh god, they're everywhere moments, and those moments only. It sounds like communication is key here, especially with AoE aggro.
Absolutely. A good tank is constantly communicating with their group, calling out targets, announcing abilities, and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Right, because accidentally pulling aggro on half the dungeon because you weren't paying attention is a surefire way to make new enemies, and not the fun, killable kind. So we've got our defensive abilities down, our aggro management strategies in place, but what about gear? Because every legendary warrior needs some epic loot to match right.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that impressed me about 12 Strings Guide is the clarity of their gear advice.
Yeah.
They don't bog you down with endless spreadsheets and complex stat weights.
Music to Kevin's ears, I'm sure. We're going for practical and effective, not necessarily min-maxed to the nth degree.
Exactly. And when it comes to warrior gear, it all starts with armor class or AC.
Makes sense. More AC equals less damage, which for a tank is always a good thing. But 12 Strings specifically calls out shield AC as being like super important.
Yeah.
Is it really that much different than, say, chest piece AC?
It is, and here's why. Shield AC isn't subject to the same caps as your regular armor. So, theoretically, you could have a shield with such insanely high AC that it could deflect a meteor shower.
Okay, now that is a visual I can get behind. A warrior just casually deflecting a meteor shower with their trusty shield. Talk about a confidence booster.
It's about maximizing your defensive potential. Now, in addition to that glorious meteor deflecting shield, 12 Strings recommends prioritizing heroic dexterity.
Heroic dexterity. I'll admit I'm not as familiar with that stat.
It's all about improving your chance to hit, which might seem odd to prioritize as a tank.
Right. You'd think it's more important for the DPS classes who are all about, like, dishing out the damage.
Here's the thing, though. Landing your attacks more consistently means you're generating more threat, which in turn makes it easier to hold aggro. So for a grouping warrior like you, Kevin, who's not just worried about their own survival, but also about protecting their teammates, heroic dexterity is a surprisingly valuable asset.
It's all about that delicate balance between offense and defense. You're not just a punching bag soaking up damage, you're an integral part of the group's damage output as well.
Exactly. And that brings us to what I consider some of the true gems of 12 Strings Guide, those little pro tips that elevate your game from good to great.
Oh, I love a good pro tip. It's like getting a little bonus wisdom from a seasoned veteran. So lay it on us. What hidden knowledge does 12 Strings have in store for us?
One that I think is absolutely brilliant, especially for group play, is the shield command.
Okay, I am intrigued. Break this down for us. What is this magical command, and how does it make our lives easier, or at least our raid nights less stressful?
So with the shield command, you can actually designate a group member. Let's say your healer, or that one DPS who always seems to find themselves standing in the fire.
We all know that person.
Right. And a portion of the damage that designated group member would take is redirected to you, the warrior. You're essentially throwing yourself in front of the metaphorical fireball to save your teammate.
No, that's what I call taking one for the team. But timing has got to be everything here, right?
Absolutely. You're not going to be shielding them 24/7. 12 Strings recommends setting up a social hotkey for this, which allows you to activate it instantly when needed. So let's say your healer is getting swarmed, or that DPS friend of yours pulls aggro at the worst possible moment.
Please tell me this is where I get to yell, "Shield command, activate!" and look like a total badass.
You absolutely can. You slam that hotkey, a glowing shield envelops your friend, and you become the hero of the hour.
Okay. I'm sold. Shield command it is. But wait, there's more. Right. More pro tips to blow our minds.
Oh, 12 Strings doesn't disappoint. They also go into great detail about positioning, which is something a lot of newer tanks overlook.
Positioning. Like where you stand in relation to the enemies. I'll admit, I've never given it much thought beyond not directly in the fire.
It's surprisingly nuanced and can make a huge difference, especially when you're dealing with multiple enemies. For example, did you know that in some cases, it can be incredibly advantageous to tank enemies against a wall?
Now that you mention it, that makes a lot of sense. It limits their movement options, prevents them from flanking you.
Exactly. And it can also prevent those accidental pulls where you end up with twice as many enemies as you intended because someone got nudged at the worst possible time.
So much strategy involved in being a good tank. It's more than just smashing buttons and looking tough.
That's what makes it so rewarding. Now, one last thing 12 Strings touches on that I think is worth mentioning, especially for those who want to dive deep into the analytical side of things, is combat logs.
Combat logs. Those are the things that, like, more hardcore players obsess over right, not exactly casual gamer territory.
They can seem intimidating at first, but 12 strings does a great job of demystifying. Combat logs are essentially a record of everything that happens during a fight. With the right tools, you can analyze those logs to see what worked, what didn't, and identify areas for improvement.
So, like, having a personal performance review after every raid?
Exactly. You can see how much damage you took, how much you mitigated, how well you held aggro, how many times you accidentally typed pizza instead of pickup. It's all there in the logs.
That's both fascinating and slightly terrifying, like having a permanent record of all your in-game triumphs and failures. But before we send Kevin off on his warrior journey, there's one last burning question I have. Macros.
Ah, macros. The double-edged sword of EverQuest.
Double-edged. I've always thought of them as a pure time saver, a way to automate those repetitive actions and streamline your gameplay.
They can be incredibly useful, but there's also a danger in relying on them too heavily, especially for key abilities. If you're not careful, macros can make you less adaptable in the heat of battle. You might miss cues, misjudge timings, or accidentally trigger the wrong ability at the worst possible moment.
Okay, so maybe macros aren't the be-all and end-all I thought they were. It's all about finding that balance, right? So what does 12 Strings recommend when it comes to macro usage?
Interestingly, they actually advise against using too many macros, especially for combat. Their philosophy is that mastering the timing and flow of your abilities is crucial for becoming a truly great warrior.
So it's about understanding the nuances of your class, knowing when to use which ability and why, not just letting a macro do all the thinking for you.
Precisely. It's about precision and control, not just button mashing. However, there's a fascinating twist to this whole macro discussion when it comes to 12 strings personally.
Well, do tell.
Remember how I mentioned they're a boxer? They play multiple characters simultaneously, which adds a whole other layer of complexity to the game. To manage this, 12 strings actually maps their main warrior abilities to social hotkeys.
Social hotkeys. So instead of just hitting a button to cast an ability, they're typing something like cast climactic stand.
You got it. This might seem counterintuitive, but it allows them to trigger abilities on their warrior while simultaneously controlling their other characters. It's a whole other level of EverQuest mastery.
Okay, now that is some next level stuff. I'm both impressed and slightly terrified. It's like watching someone juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle blindfolded. You just know something could go horribly wrong, but they make it look effortless.
That's the beauty of EverQuest, though. There's always something new to learn, a different way to approach a challenge, a deeper layer to uncover.
Well said. And that, Kevin, is what this deep dive has been all about. We've taken this incredible guide, crafted by 12 Strings, and we've distilled it down to the core concepts, the actionable insights, and the game-changing tips that will transform you into a true warrior of Norath.
The guide is an amazing foundation, but the true journey begins when you start experimenting, developing your own playstyle, and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. So go forth, Kevin. Experiment, master those abilities, and most importantly, have fun. And when you lead us to victory on our next raid night, make sure to tell those enemies that 12 Strings and the deep dive sent you. Until next time.